Hello. I had an idea while working on music theory that I would like to make a reality. To do this, I need a new type of piano, and an electronic one would suit my purpose best. I hope you find this project interesting. Can your company make an electronic piano using the following specifications? The distance between the outer edges of the C keys, or any other white keys of the same name within the range of 1 octave, remains the same as on a standard piano 186 mm. The white key must have a width of 19 mm and a length of 150 mm. The black key must be 9 mm wide, and 105 mm long. The first octave a key, or the part of the instrument's body right next to that key, must have an LED indicator that shows both the pitch frequency and the location of the first octave. The same indicators must be on the A key of the second octave and small octave. Using a pedal, one can extend the keyboard 1 octave upwards or downwards. By extending the keyboard to the right, upwards, the left side of the keyboard becomes automatically shorter, and the indicator on the A key lights up 1 octave to the left. Likewise, if we extend the keyboard in the direction of the lower notes, the A key indicator moves 1 octave to the right. The keys between B and C must be colored light gray, so that one can immediately see the octave boundaries. The color can, of course, be different, but it should not strain the eyes, and should go well with the other colors. The electronic piano must have a microphone, or two, that can register sounds made by another instrument, e.g. an organ, within a range of 16 to 22,000 Hz, and automatically adjust its pitch frequency to that instrument. The electronic piano must also have a device that allows tuning it to any pitch frequency between 128 and 1024 Hz. It must be capable of a wired or wireless network connection and have an interface with peripheral devices like a computer, network router, or phone. Other features of the instrument must meet the standard requirements set for modern synthesizers, because notation for the new system has yet to be developed. In the future, there must be a feature making it possible to transpose music in traditional notation to the new notation, as well as music created using this instrument or for this instrument, to traditional notation. The table for tuning the keys is provided in the Excel spreadsheet enclosed. If this is not enough to program a microchip, I include an explanation with mathematical formulas below. But now I'd like to briefly as possible anyway, explain why I need such an instrument. For 1,000 years, musicians have been assuming that an octave is divided into 7 tones and 5 semitones, which is not exactly accurate. Saying that the octave consists of 7 steps and 12 intervals would be closer to the truth. But this only applies to music in Europe, and a few other places in the world. The system adopted in India, China, and South America is somewhat different. But it is different in the details and is still based on an incorrect foundation. If people who call themselves specialists cannot solve a problem within a certain system, then clearly it is the fault of the system itself, not the solutions. So what is the current system accepted in music? A system that from the viewpoint of nature is completely wrong. Dividing the octave into 7 steps is an incorrect system at its very foundation. The systems where the octave is divided into 5 or 6 steps are just as wrong. And all of those additional divisions when an octave can have even 20 intervals is just multiplying the basic error. None of these systems can lead to a proper solution. Let's look at the most popular, and wrong, system in music: dividing the octave into 7 steps. Knowing that this combination of sounds must harmonize with each other and resonate with combinations of other sounds in a regular period, we see that this is not going to happen. Mathematically, it looks like this. To understand the mess we get after all these calculations, let's look at the piano for a visual aid. Unfortunately, it does not clarify anything, but just adds to the confusion. Ask anyone who hasn't studied in a musical school to show on the keyboard which keys are tones, and which ones are semitones. No one can perform this simple task on their own, unless they hit the right keys randomly. And this is not good. In what other field is 1 plus 0.5 not equal to 2 to 0.5? There is no such field, except for music where it is business as usual. Say, you have two tones next to each other, M and N, with a semitone in between. But M hash is not the same as NB. And this very odd approach to mathematics is represented in notation. I am not proud that I can't read sheet music. This is the main reason why most musicians won't want to even listen to me or try to understand me. But it's like Greek to a person who has not studied music since childhood. You have at least 3 clefs that radically change what is written on the lines of the stave. And then there are sharps and flats, pure madness. And if anyone who cannot otherwise express themselves through composition tries to use all these signs, they get something like this. All that effort has not led to a Chopin-level ballad, but at least the notation has more scribbling than the famous composer. Let's imagine that car drivers have to keep in mind that every road sign has a different meaning depending on whether that sign is on a national road, a regional road, or a small rural road. And then they would also have to know that combinations of two signs give these signs a completely different meaning, or the fact that they are placed, say, under a traffic light or above it, somewhat increases or reduces the importance of these signs. Silly, isn't it? Really? But in music, this situation is perfectly normal. And then we get equal temperament as an attempt to combine things that cannot be combined, putting together intervals that don't go together, and as a bonus, confusing people completely. A typical example of what I mean can be found in teaching recommendations for acoustics teachers in music schools. Everything is simple and clear as long as you talk about the sound as a physical phenomenon, with waves, frequencies, interference, resonance, etc. But as soon as these recommendations touch on music, you find yourself surrounded by complete nonsense. All of the physics explained before that goes out the window, and the maths turns into complete rubbish. Let's ask the same question. Why do we need equal temperament if everything is perfectly tuned in nature? And this is where we hit our heads against the system of dividing the octave into parts that are impossible in a natural way. And all of this because musicians in general don't understand what technical specifications must be set for musical instruments with a fixed tuning. They also do not have any understanding of how resonance occurs. Let's roll back a few paragraphs. You have 7 steps and 12 intervals. It seems correct. But it only seems so because musicians don't even bother thinking about what's most important in their field, i.e., what is sound. Let's research some more. For visual clarity, take a look at a string. In nature, the string vibrates in that particular manner, and if we compare the physical vibrations with all of the terminology stuck onto it, we see a mismatch. If you're observant enough, you'll notice that something isn't right with the table 2, because the value of the last interval is 0.25, and not 0.125. It's twice that of 1/8. Let's consider these names of intervals from this point of view. Musicians wouldn't think for a second to put or instead of they. Here, this is so obvious. Is it really? Sorry, we made mistake. Say musicians, the A should go instead of the H. But then you get complete nonsense. What should it be like then? Ask yourself this question again. What is sound? If you don't know, here's your answer. Sound is vibrations in a medium. Vibrations. These vibrations take place within an interval and not a single point. Because even if one point vibrates, it vibrates to and fro, i.e. in an interval. This means that the above diagram should look like this. So let me write this down in bold. The octave has 8 intervals. There can, of course, be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, etc. This is the natural scale. At some point, the person who invented the keyboard went completely bonkers, and instead of 8 intervals he put in just 7. More specifically, it was Guido of Arezzo who went bonkers. This might be a cargo cult, but as a result of this, we got notation that was not based on any logic. The guy just saw and heard something somewhere, did not understand it. And the result was what it was. And keyboard instrument manufacturers did not think about it either, which is why now we have to solve this problem. So now let's look at the technical specifications for keyboard instruments. Resonance is at the core of everything. As we press a key and release the string, we must hear and see how the strings in all the other octaves start vibrating, too. We should see and hear that, but we neither see nor hear. Let's look at this tuning table. It shows that for each tone, the frequencies are made to roughly match the resonance ratios, which in turn prevents chords from sounding well with each other, not creating a harmony. We need that every fixed sound on the keyboard is in resonance vibration ratios with the octave period. This relationship is best shown graphically as a spiral whose turns are each twice as long as the previous one. The length of the arc of one spiral turn is twice longer than the length of the previous turn, and twice shorter than that of the next turn. The length of the arc is proportional to the pitch of the sound in hertz, i.e. 265 mm corresponds to 265 Hz. Now, the following figure shows in detail the intervals between fixed sounds. We can also see here in this graph that regardless of the angle at which we turn the coordinate system, nothing changes conceptually. The most important thing in this whole system is that the lengths of the arcs of one sector can be divided into ratios that make it possible for the material to resonate, i.e. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 512, 1024, etc. We also clearly see that any other division of the arc does not meet the conditions for resonance. The task is then as follows. Find a linear equation in polar coordinates that meets the following condition. Each subsequent turn of the spiral is twice longer than the previous one. Let's assume that the equation is described by a logarithmic spiral. This equation is the basis for the spreadsheet I've programmed. If you change the pitch frequency, the entire table changes along with it. If we compare this table with what is used in music right now, we'll see that only A and C match. In the case of resonance, the wave splits into 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. parts. and certainly not into 3, 5 or 7 parts. Once a system exhausts its potential and there is no way of correcting it, despite the need for corrections, we need to change the system. We need to change the system. This is so simple. Divide the octave, as the name suggests, into 8 parts, 8 tones and 8 semitones. Today, keyboards look like this. What it should be is this. This keyboard and its natural sounding give us a few advantages. First, equal temperament becomes completely redundant. Second, we get simpler notation. Third, performers only have to deal with 2 fingerings for a musical piece. You either start with a white key or a black one. Fourth, fixed pitch instruments will not clash with string and wind instruments whose operation is based on natural pitch. All other benefits can be derived from these 4. Transitioning to the division of the octave into 8 tones, steps, and 8 halftones, or 16 intervals, opens up completely new opportunities that so far composers and musicians tried to achieve using microtonality. Let's take a closer look at why composers tried to pepper notation with sharps and flats, and why interest in microtonality appeared. 2 years ago, as a non-specialist, I was certain that keys and choice of key was a non-issue, and there was no difference what key to play a piece in. Having looked deeper into this, I had to change my opinion. With the current instrument tuning system, it matters what key you play a piece in. For example, if the composer wants to regularly emphasize a particular detail of a phrase, he will choose a key in which this emphasized phrase is within an interval between F and B, while if the composer wants the emphasized phrase to sound big and bold, the key will be such that the phrase is within an interval between A and F. This is clearly visible on the tuning table, and actually on the keyboard, wherever you have more keys. The division of the octave is finer there, and where there are fewer keys, it's coarser. And it is specifically based on this fine and coarse division that one can determine keys. This system does not have a direct connection to the frequency of the sound. But composers and musicians wanted to express themselves with a broader range, and this is how microtonality was born. I'm actually not being exactly accurate here. Microtonality has existed since music began. And its presence only started to become limited once the West started transitioning to the division of the octave into 7 parts. This system has also crippled the music of the Middle East, India, and China? Though these people managed to preserve the division of the octave into up to 20 intervals, the basis was destroyed deliberately. And in today's Indian music, the octave is divided into 7 steps and 20 intervals. Middle Eastern, Cairo, piano made at the turn of the 20th century. August Förster also participated in building such pianos, and created an ingenious keyboard. It is ingenious indeed, but the system is rotten, and there has been no progress about it to this day. As you can see, the keys have black circles marking the boundaries of the octaves. The octave is divided into 6 tones, steps, and 18 intervals. But there could have been tones, semitones, quarter tones, eighth tones. There could have been. So the piano exists. But there is no point to it. I have also been surprised by the fact that pianists, in Europe and the Americas, and musicologists have only heard about this piano, but don't know anything about it. Finding information online is very difficult, because who would have thought, microtonality is a religion, and the members of its cult do not want anything to do with traditional music. I randomly stumbled upon some of these websites, listened to the music, and had to conclude, just for myself, that except for the sound effects, the music was, I don't know how to put it more nicely, Not clean. This lack of cleanliness could have been caused by the equal temperament, because a halftone is not arithmetically exactly in the middle of two nearby tones, and a quarter tone is not arithmetically exactly in the middle of two nearby semitones, etc. So taking two pianos here and tuning one of them a quarter of a tone higher is stupid in general. Meanwhile, with the system that I propose, this can be done successfully, but I don't think there is any practical point to this, because sound effects today are successfully handled by electronics. I have heard brilliant examples of microtonal music. I've heard a Russian violinist play, "Dear Passengers, the train from Moscow to Khabarovsk arrives at third platform, track 5. The numbering of the cars begins at the front of the train." A wonderful performance because the listeners recognize the station and the route, without error. Or hearing the world around you, as performed by the famous Avenue Soul Choir or the Latvian Radio Choir, and recognizing it, that's something you can truly enjoy. But listening to quarter tones and eighth tones on musical instruments with fixed tuning, and tuned in a wrong system at that, brings no enjoyment at all. None at all. On a piano, microtonality not only sounds poor, but also serves no purpose. At some point I considered making my own contribution to microtonal music. Instead of 112 keys, I could, technically this is possible, squeeze in an additional 49 keys, without changing the length of the keyboard. Yes, you can build anything, but what's the point? First, who will be able to properly use a piano like this? If there are few or no such musicians. For other pianists, all these additional keys would be an impediment in their playing, purely making it technically harder to move your fingers around, or to quickly find your way around the keyboard visually. Second, while on an electronic piano we can achieve a tuning precision of plus or minus 0.2 Hz. On a mechanical piano one can only dream of such precision. Plus or minus 0.5 Hz is the absolute maximum, and even plus or minus 1 Hz is fine. We can see this in the equal temperament spreadsheet, which shows that the tolerances range from 1.5 Hz to 840 Hz. Now let's look at the table of frequencies showing what they should be like and include quarter tones in it. Quarter tones are marked red in the table. If the A1 pitch is 440 Hz, then in the sub-contra, contra, and even in the great octave, the quarter tone will be within the margin of tuning error. What is the point of the quarter tone if we cannot distinguish it from a tone or a semitone? So in reality, quarter tones start showing up and affecting harmony only in the small octave. And the keyboard ends at the fourth octave. This is what the situation looks like with A1 equals 440 Hz. But what happens if the pitch is at 256 Hz? Let's look at the next table. Here we see that quarter tones show up only in the first octave. With the pitch at 440 Hz, only a half of the sixth octave is within audible range. If we raise the pitch to 512 Hz, middle-aged people will not hear the sixth octave at all, and there will be no particular point to microtonality up to the first octave. Indians divide the octave into 7 steps, the total number of intervals being 22. If the error is foundational, creating further divisions just multiplies the error. In theory, we can divide the octave into any number of steps and calculate the pitch of all notes. However, there would be no resonance, i.e. harmony, in such sound. Perhaps it would make more sense and be simpler to divide the octave naturally, i.e. into 16 parts, with 8 tones and 8 semitones, or 8 steps and 16 intervals. And then we will hardly play any microtonal music on fixed-pitch instruments, leaving clean microtonality to the instruments that suit it, from strings to a saw at the fair. So this is my brief explanation for making this piano. Best regards, Ratis Pavels.